You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 127 of the Hunting Collective. I am Ben O'Brien, and I'm joined by Phil T. Engineer. Say hey, Phil.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
We're recording this on Memorial Day, so I'm really good. We're going to make this short and sweet so we can get back to our families, but I was just explaining to you that Jamie Farinato, just shot a giant black bear. And so we're down in my garage. I had to wash my hands to come up here and record. We're down in my garage, skinning out his black bear because it died near the road, so we could drag it into my garage. So I have small children running around on bikes, a lot of Americana, and then in the middle of it is the blood and guts and gore of processing a black bear. Phil.
Yeah. Have you invited any of the neighborhood children to come see?
All of them. Yes.
Wow.
A lot of
let's see how many complaints your HOA gets.
Yeah, I try to stake the claim within suburbia that it's going to happen. Like there's going to be some gore around my place. You're just going to have to deal with it. And given our last podcast, I feel like I'm more prepared now than ever to deal with life's challenges. So we're kind of flying high, Phil, after last week. I know you were just kind of a bystander to the story, but I spent the last 7 days dealing with kind of the aftermath of our podcast last week with Brett Bond, talking about his father, Glenn, and their story, as amazing as it is. There is so many details to that story that we left out. We got a few people complaining that we talked too long before the bear attack story actually got going. But I will admit to saying we probably left out another hour's worth of conversation about the details surrounding that attack. So I've got a pile of emails about asking questions, praising Brett Bond as a hero, saying Glenn Bond is the toughest son of a bitch alive, which I agree. Do you agree with that, Phil?
I think so. I mean, the fact that his body was just even functioning after that is miraculous.
Yeah, I got a text from Lorraine Phillips, his wife, saying that he listened to the podcast and thought it was okay, which I felt very vindicated. I really did. I really very much wanted his approval, and we got it in some strange way. So we're going to return to that story on themeateater.com in the coming days. If you check the website, I'd say tomorrow, which is Wednesday. We're still working out a lot of details. There'll be a big story on that. So if you're still wondering anything about Glenn Bond, Brett Bond, Lorraine Phillips, and their wild and crazy story from bear attack to medical incarceration, I guess we'll call it. There's some arguing about what what to call what happened to Brett Bond. But there's a lot of drama, a lot to uncover. So we got a big piece coming on the MeatEater.com, so you can check that out in the next couple of days. So be looking for that. Phil, I got to tell you, I got 2 good emails. But before we get to that, I kind of want to explain a little bit of what we're doing today. Do you know, you're aware of what we're doing today, Phil, right?
Not at all. Why don't you why don't you tell me about it, Ben?
Attention? I thought you'd have a lot of insight on what I'm trying to pull off here.
Oh, sorry to disappoint.
Whether it'll be successful or not. So here's what we're trying to do, and I say I'm trying because I find this particular conversation a little difficult, only because I'm out of my depth in many parts of it. But let's just say this: we talked to a gentleman named Nick Holla from Impossible Meats about their company.
Okay, Ben, I'm sorry. I thought you had some special surprise planned for this opening segment. We're talking about the subject matter of the episode. Oh yeah, I know about that.
You know about that. I thought for sure. I thought you just given up on me, and I wanted to move past it because it did hurt me a little bit that you had given up on the show.
I'm not that detached. I know who the guests are today, Ben. I do.
Okay, well, how about you tell everybody who the guests? Let's test your allegiance, Philip. Tell us who the guests are today. There's 2 of them.
Yeah, the guests are Nick Holla from Impossible Meats, and is it Robbie Sansom?
Yeah,
Robbie Sansom from
Force of Nature Meats.
Force of Nature Meats. That's right.
Ironically so, they both have meat in the title. One of them doesn't use animal flesh, the other does. But what Robbie and Nick are here to do today is provide a little bit of perspective on something we've chatted about and had a little fun with and got real serious about in the past. And that is essentially our food system, what it is today, its impact on our world, our environment, and how we can do it better. And I know we're a hunting podcast, and that's not necessarily right in line with going out in the woods, finding an animal, killing it, and bringing it home, like Jamie Farinato is down in my garage doing right now. But I'll tell you that we have to address this stuff, in my opinion. It's way more prevalent now in the times of COVID. But how our food system works in the future affects lots of things. It affects land use. It affects how healthy we are. It affects, trust me, if meat goes away, public opinion for hunting, I'm sure will wane. So there's a ton of things that are happening here that we need to keep an eye on. And so what we're doing today is talking to Nick and talking then to Robbie and trying to suss out what their solutions are for continuing our food systems. Now, we've talked about plant-based meat, lab-based meat, facsimiles for meat. What Nick at Impossible was going to describe is their quest to take animal flesh, animal products out of our food system by 2035. So that's their stated goal. Their CEO, Pat Brown, has stated that publicly. It says that on their website. So that's a very radical, in my view, way to look at it. And then Robbie Sansom will then he's going to take us down a path looking at, as he has in the past on this podcast, regenerative agriculture, getting back to the land and using animals to help regenerate our soil and regenerate the earth and bring us back to the biodiversity that we all know that we need. So again, Phil, I will admit to being out of my depth here. Can you tell?
Only a little bit, but I mean, the thing is that I think it's one thing that both of these men and pretty much everyone who knows anything about it can agree on is that the way meat is generally harvested and, sold and produced in this country is not sustainable. And like people have different ways of trying to, fix that. And so I think this is a great episode because it's got two differing perspectives and the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, and if you're, we call ourselves conservationists here at Meat Eater. I strive to be that. I really do. I don't know if I always live up to the likes of Aldo Leopold or not, but he was a man of the natural world, a man of knowledge about the natural world, and something that Robbie suggested to me the other day, and it's a great one. It'd be noteworthy if you would go and find his piece titled Odyssey. It was written in 1942, and I think it pretty well demonstrates how long we've known these issues of the ecosystem versus agriculture. And that's kind of what some of this boils down to. And this is suggested by Robbie, and I really agree that it's a good assignment for everybody to read that. And if you Google it, you can find it. And it may help anyone out there who's interested, and hopefully you're interested in this topic, to better understand how nature works and how a system that functions in harmony with nature can be a better solution. And as we talk about in the show, my supply chain is the natural world. We have federal and state agencies that help manage that, give me access to my food supply, and the land and ecosystem that's required to keep those populations healthy is very important to me. So all that ties in. So we won't go much further into that. We're going to discuss it. But the way I wanted to set this up, Phil, where we had Nick on and Robbie on, they have I would say opposing viewpoints in lots of ways. They both kind of have a similar mission. They have different ways of getting there. So it's really an interesting dichotomy. So you're going to hear from Nick first, and then you're going to hear from Robbie second. And then we'll close it out and kind of wrap up a little bit of how we think about it. I didn't want to really get them on the same call because it would have just turned into a debate point by point, I think. I wanted to hear each one of them out, take from each one of them the perspective we could, and then compare and contrast. And you guys can all make up your minds whether you want to eat plant-based meat or you want to have a nice bison burger. You guys can probably understand where I fall. Phil, you gonna side with bison or the plant facsimile?
Yeah, I might just dip my toes in a little bit of each. How does that sound?
Yeah, you're a millennial. You're a millennial.
But not really, because so far the plant-based stuff that I've tried is not great. But maybe that'll change in the future.
There's a deal, man. There's a deal in this where like a lot of the most compelling part of the story that we're going to work our way through today is about this plant-based meat. It kind of sits at the altar of technology. It's like progress and technology and pushing forward and doing new things and finding new solutions. And so it's just really an interesting mindset. So I'm glad we got to go through it today. But before we get to that, Phil, got a couple of emails. This is one of my favorite emails we've ever gotten, buddy. And the premise, I'm going to read you the first sentence and let you react. It's from Daniel Biernink. I'm sure I said that wrong. Sorry, Dan. The first sentence is, "I've got a crazy theory. I think Shane Mahoney is God in disguise." You want to hear more, Phil? You want me to go on?
Sure. No, I'm on board so far.
You on board? I'm on board.
Yeah.
Go with me on this for a minute, he says. The white hair, the beard, the voice, his immense knowledge and ability to articulate that knowledge is otherworldly. I bet he was sitting up in heaven, watching us idiots destroy the natural world, and he thought to himself, I'm going down there and show these dummies why I made nature the way I made it, before it's gone for good. Of course, Daniel says, I'm mostly kidding. P.S. Phil is as soft as puppy shit. Later, Dan. That's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, Dan.
I mean, no matter how true it is, it's unnecessary.
You don't need to take shots at Phil like that. I would
listen.
Never do that.
That's a great email. Some points are well stated, but I have one counterpoint, and that is, if Shane Mahoney were God, it would not have taken us an hour to troubleshoot his microphone to start the interview.
That's part of the ruse. That's part of the ruse, man.
Got it. Okay.
That's part of how he tricks us into thinking that he's not God. I from just a visual standpoint, absolutely.
Sure.
It's same for the audio perspective. He's got it. But yeah, love Shane Mahoney. Always love having him on. Him and I are talking more and more about doing some series of podcasts together for THC. So you'll be seeing more, I hope, and hearing more importantly, Shane Mahoney in the future. Phil, you've been talking about your first poop in the woods on other podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, Yanni asked and I answered. I'm not going to say no.
Did you reference the Hunting Collective when you answered?
I did. I referenced you by name. I referenced this podcast.
You was like, when I was on like my main job, which is the Hunting Collective, I told the
Superior
story.
Podcast, the Hunting Collective, hosted by Benjamin O'Brien.
Yes.
Yeah, those. I think that's what I said. Don't fact check. Don't check. I'm sure I'm right.
Perfect.
Yeah. But the answer is yes. I recounted my tale.
Good. Well, we got an email from Patrick Array, and he said, all across the Meat Eater Planet, and I haven't listened to whatever podcast it is that you're talking about, where you are cheating on me by telling your first crap in the woods story elsewhere. I feel like we should have copyrighted that here for maybe, because we're going to make that toilet paper t-shirt.
That's right. Yeah.
Coming up pretty soon. Anyway, Patrick Ray says, all the talk across the Meat Eater platform about Phil crapping in the woods has left me weirdly curious for any stories about hunting situations that involved accepting, then embracing, unavoidable, as he calls it, quote-unquote, disaster pants in order to either make a kill or keep from ruining someone else's kill. It's a little confusing. I mean, I think he's talking about shit in his pants. Shit in your pants. That's what I think. Mm-hmm. So he's asking if any of us have made the sacrifice to shit our pants. I have, actually.
Oh God.
You want to hear it, or maybe keep it for another time?
That's up. Do you want to put it in the pocket? We can put it in the pocket.
Let's put it.
Save it for next week.
Let's put it in the pocket, which is a weird turn of phrase. We're gonna save it for next week. Next week, I promise, I will tell you the time that I mean, it was multiple times on one hunt that I shit myself. I mean, multiple times.
Come on.
It became a regular occurrence, in fact. But there was extenuating circumstances, Phil. So I feel like I'm totally in the right here. So, but we'll wait till episode 128 to tell you all about that, because we don't want to ruin, what we would generally have is kind of a high-minded conversation coming up. Okay,
it's going to take a lot of. It's going to take a lot to convince me that this was anything but just.
No way. To convince you,
just
Phil.
Poor decision making.
Nope.
No. There's nothing you could tell me that would justify you crapping your pants multiple times for hunting. I guess.
Wait till next week. Just wait till next week. I've written the story multiple times, so if you go around MeatEater.com and search for poop stories, you'll find it. But we're just giving you guys what you want here, because there's nothing more popular in 2020, I don't think. And we've given away hunts to New Zealand and all kinds of. We've had a lot of big time happenings on the show in 2020. Nothing bigger than Phil's first crap in the woods. So we're going to continue down that storyline. For those of you that follow every week,
the only thing that would be more popular is if I was crapping in the woods and then got attacked by a bear while I was crapping. That would be the most popular story.
While shaving your mustache.
Yes.
That's we should probably make that happen. But so next week we got to have Joe Farinado on to talk about this big bear he killed, because boy, he killed a big one, and we need to tell the story. But we'll get to all of that next week. So for now, I want to get you straight to this is a bit of a, like I said, we're doing it differently. You're going to hear Nick first, and then a little break, and then Robbie, and we'll come back and wrap it all up for you here in 127. Enjoy Nick Holla from Impossible Meats.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Nick, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Good. I can't complain. You are not in Kansas, that's for sure. You're over in Hong Kong right now, so we're reaching you.
Yes, this is a long ways away from the farm. So yeah, I've moved over to Hong Kong about 2.5 months ago.
That's how like I said prior to hitting record. I want to ask you all about that, but we got 30 minutes or so with you, and hopefully we can stretch it a little bit further. So, kind of just get to what we want to talk about, and I think give us a quick rundown of your history with Impossible Meats, how you first heard about the company, how you came to be an employee, and what it's been like.
Yeah, so my background has been in agriculture and food the vast majority of my life. I grew up in a dairy farm in southern Minnesota. My whole family, extended family, all essentially were in the agricultural world. My grandparents had the chickens, my uncles had the beef cows and pigs, and it was definitely a very big farming community. And so with that is I've been connected to the land and environment ever since I was born, essentially. And I think that drove a big sustainability drive in me personally, because our job as farmers is to produce great food for people affordably while maintaining our land for the future generations. And the challenge is just the scale that we do agriculture at today, and the inefficiencies in it make it really hard and pretty much impossible to really maintain our land and pass it down to the future generations. And that's a lot of what we're doing at Impossible. And then, after the farm, I was an engineer, worked at General Mills, designing new products and manufacturing systems, which is cool. Got to really go into consumers' homes all the way down to the production floor to make things happen. But it's like, making a biscuit cheaper or making a cool fruit roll-up that I print your picture on. It's like, I'm not going to really change the world that way. And so I went out to grad school. And at that point, I was actually done with agriculture and food because I didn't see any impact in it. And I was focusing fully on renewable energy. So solar, biofuels, batteries, and that's where I saw great technology, great science, and global impact, which is what I wanted to do. And then through that process, got to know the venture capital community in San Francisco. And one of the partners of the solar company I was working at had been talking to our founder, Dr. Brown. And our founder's background, he had spent 25 years in the medical school at Stanford researching cancer and genomics. He had never done anything in food before, but he took a sabbatical looking at where he could have the biggest impact in the world as a biochemist. And realized by far this is what it was.
Yeah. Did you find that, what's your official title over there, by the way? Get that out of the way.
So I'm the Senior Vice President of International. Have had many roles at Impossible. So we started the company 9 years ago. I was technically the first employee before the company started. And the first 5 years ran kind of anything that was not science was my job to get done. So financing, finding space, building supply chains, agricultural work, quite a bit of engineering, and really anything that we needed to kind of support our team to help them do the research to understand what actually makes meat, fish, and dairy food so good, and then starting to build products. And then I ran partnership strategy and new initiatives for a couple of years. And then the last couple of years, I've been running international. And then last year, ran the retail business back in the US. So you kind of, it's a startup. You kind of got to do everything.
That's right. I was going to say that. You probably have the Nick at email. You're hanging on to that, I bet.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I like it. Well, it seems like you're well heeled to answer a lot of questions I have. About I've had the product. Our founder Stephen Rennell and I did a little taste test. One of your competitors were involved, but I've also had like the Impossible Whopper too, just to give it a shot. So in me, I think you have. I know you have kind of like an intrigued consumer who eats a lot of meat, but also sees like this could be an alternative. And then I run into a lot of questions and issues along the way. So I want to talk to you and kind of go through some of those. Have you give your take on it, the company's take on it. It seems like you've been doing this and devoted your life to it. So I'm happy to have you in here to talk.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Do you find that a lot of folks at your company are doing it, for more ideological, I guess is maybe not the best way to put it, is one way, ideological reasons, they have a larger goal in mind?
Yes, that is definitely something that we hire a lot for, is the passion behind what we're doing. And Impossible is a passion, mission-based company. Like we've been asked many times, like, are you a technology company? Are you a food company? And the best answer I heard Pat give is, we are a technology company. We are creating a new technology to create a much more efficient, sustainable food system. We're a food company. We are delivering good food to people. But at the end of the day, we're a planet company. That is literally the only reason we exist. Our mission is to produce the most delicious meat, fish, and dairy foods the world's ever had, all directly from plants. And to doing that, we can restore the biodiversity of the earth back to what it's been in the past versus what's going on now, where we're continuing really to destroy the biodiversity of the earth. And I mean, you look at some of the numbers, and right now we use about 45% of the arable land surface for animal agriculture, 25 to 30% all the fresh water each year, more greenhouse gases in transportation. And you look at the biodiversity and the wildlife on Earth, it's been cut by more than half in the last 40 years. And that's really driven by our hunger for meat, fish, and dairy foods. And the challenges are just extremely inefficient. Like an animal is a food production technology. You look at like a beef cow in the US, which is certainly one of the most efficient beef production systems. The more concentrated you are, the more efficient. And it's a 3% efficient technology of taking plant-based nutrients and proteins and converting them into meat. So if we go directly to the plant-based source, we can use 30 times less resources in a lot of ways. And that's really what the mission of the company is to do that. And then for the, roughly 600 people we have at the company, the vast majority see that as like, it's something they're doing for our future generations more than just, making a quick buck.
Gotcha. Do you feel like, I think it's a lot of times when people are debating these types of things, I see this a lot in things like gun control. I feel like people are talking past each other when there's a debate about something. Not that we're going to debate it, but talking past, like, I want to defend my family and I want to, save lives of children. Like these are not things that kind of line up in terms of let's have a discussion. So here, is it that, I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast might ask, is it the eating of meat you're against? Because I've had vegans on and we've talked in depth about sentience and suffering and necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering and those type of things. Is that baked into the core belief there, or is it more the food system? How would you articulate kind of that nuanced piece of it?
The way I'd articulate that is we want everybody to have the meat, fish, and dairy foods they love. We just don't produce them the right way today. We use animals, which is a very arcane, inefficient production system. Our job is to give people the meat, fish, and dairy foods they love made directly from plants. And it's going to be so much more environmentally friendly and better as we scale. And the United Nations predicts that, meat consumption itself will increase 70% by 2050. Looking at the statistics I started, it's like it doesn't work. So our job is to produce the meat, fish, and dairy foods the world loves at a much lower environmental clip. And our current products, we use 96% less land, 89% less greenhouse gas emissions, and 87% less water. And so we can do that. Now, the fundamental aspect, anybody in the food system who is working to make the food system more sustainable is a friend. There's opportunities across the board, across everything we do to make things more sustainable. Our take in the long term is we have to be and somewhat revolutionary to change the system. But every little incremental piece in the short term also will help.
Gotcha. No, that's good to hear. I think that's something, coming into this conversation, I was wondering a lot about. Is there, I've seen your CEO says a lot. He says a lot of things that made me go, whoa. One of them was that the goal is to eliminate animals in the food system by 2035. And I think, for my money, the animals that I eat are in my freezer. I go out in the mountain and get them, and that's how I work it. But for a lot of people, that's not as sustainable as it is for me, because I had to learn a lot of skills and a lot of things. So when I see something like that, I'm immediately taken aback. The first question, of course, is how would you do that? And it's which I think you probably have a particularly long answer for. Then the second question is, I would return again to, like, are we removing meat from everyone's diet, or are we removing the unsustainable system in which that meat gets to our table?
Yeah, I'll start actually in a bit different place, because obviously this is a hunting podcast, and we've looked at this across the macro scale. Our job and what we want to do is, by being much more efficient in the system, we can actually use a lot less land, and a lot of the marginal lands we're using today for animal agriculture, we can put back into native vegetation and let the wildlife and the ecosystems recover, which I think is good for certainly everybody. We can pull greenhouse gases out of the air, and there's a lot of stuff we can do. Now, if you look at there's a couple of statistics on wild animals that we've looked at. One is, there's 10 times more biomass of livestock on Earth today than all wild mammals left on Earth. And if we were to, say, switch and go from eating, the meat that we get from farming today, and go to all wild animals and hunting, we'd be all vertebrates would be harvested within 2 months, and we'd be completely barren. And it's like, it just doesn't scale. We're trying to feed 7 billion, going on 10 billion people. We have to have a better system one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about that. We talk about that here a lot. The hunting is not something, while the value systems may be scalable, in practice, it's not scalable, and it can't be. So definitely an understood part there, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then your question on, how do we do it? I think one of the key reasons I joined Pat as we started this company was the only way to change the system is to produce products that are better. We can't be out there preaching to eat vegetarian or vegan, and so you can do that and some people will come, or animal welfare, or whatever your essentially motivations are. The only way to change a system is to create a system that's better than what it already exists. And the opportunity is really around the efficiency and the inefficiencies in the animal agricultural system. And so there's a huge opportunity there to create something that's much more efficient. And then if you look at the plant-based world, the nutrients are much more diverse. Like, an animal is not made to make food for humans. We use it essentially as a way to produce, high nutrient-rich food that you can either hunt or farm and consume. But there's every reason to believe we can create products that are better than an animal ever could, because we're not limited by what an animal's body does for food. And what we've done in the first 5 years is we were really creating, before we launched a product, creating a platform that could understand, why do you enjoy the experience of meat so much, and dairy and fish? And we would break that down into the fundamental drivers. And we learned a lot of stuff. We learned things like, in meat, and especially in like the richer, darker meats, you'll have a protein called myoglobin, or a heme protein. And you can think about this as hemoglobin in your blood. And when we were breaking down the flavor system, we learned that the flavor and aroma of meat is extremely complex. As you cook a steak or a burger on the grill, you're producing hundreds of molecules and aromas for flavor that all happen in that cooking process. So if you cook a steak medium versus rare versus well done, your flavor profile is actually very different, because that chemistry is at different stages. And so it's extremely complex. And if we wanted to try to replicate that by picking out each piece one by one, it'd be very complicated. And that was until we found out that myoglobin, or the heme protein, really drives all that flavor chemistry. And so then we would look in the plant-based world, and all plants and animals have heme proteins. And so we use a protein called leg hemoglobin, where the heme's the same. And so we can follow the same process of cooking, just like you do in meat. So you get the exact same experience at home when you take it and put it on your grill.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what, like, part of the cognitive dissonance for me is calling it meat and beef and pork and all that. I know you'll have a good answer to that. I want to certainly talk about that. But before we go definitely down that road, I know you guys had a product shortage in 2019. You know, we're talking about scaling to 2035. Soy is a big part of your product. Can you just walk people through who have these questions? How much soy goes into it? How much land? You know, how is a soy planted? Is it planted in a monoculture? How is it farmed? Take people through kind of that part of this so we can understand the difference in land use when we're saying we're using less land, how we're using the land. You know, take people through kind of the nuts and bolts of that.
Yeah, it comes back down to the efficiency side at the start. So I'll kind of go on the ingredients of the product. So the ingredients, the soy protein gives you the structure in the chew as you bite into that. Then we have a potato protein and cellulose that gives you that transformation that goes from soft, where you can make it into a meatball, into a burger, into a dumpling, really whatever you want to. And then as you cook it, it firms up. And then coconut and sunflower oil give you that richness, and then the heme protein gives you really that flavor generation along with the micronutrients. You know, from a supply chain side, you know, an animal is just very inefficient at using the proteins and essentially ingredients and crops that we grow today. But the crops have been optimized for animal consumption because the vast majority of the land that we use is producing crops for animal consumption. And so soy is the most scalable one today. For every time we replace, you know, meat from an animal with meat from Impossible, we actually reduce the amount of land that's needed because we're just much more efficient. And so that's how you get to the 96% less land use and 87% less water use. It's really driven by the need for less crops overall. And I think over time, you know, the right production system in India versus Germany versus the US certainly is different as well. And I think we have an opportunity to rethink how we actually drive the global food system and how we can use plants and many different sources of plants, and not just, you know, soy and corn and, you know, the few main staples that are produced globally for animal production. And we can switch that into, you know, a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen crops, and you're going to get a lot more variety of plants. You know, early in our company's stage, we've been in market for about 3.5, 4 years now, and so you can't solve everything at once. So a lot of these supply chain transformations, you know, we focus on the long term of like, what can we do? And in the short term, you know, using soy protein, which is a great protein for human nutrition, it's a good amino acid balance, it's scalable, it works well in the product, it's a good proxy. Long term, I think we're going to have a lot of different protein sources.
Got it. What's that look like in 2035? You know, for an average American, let's say we get to 2035 and we've eliminated animals from the food system. Am I picturing in my mind that fields and fields of soybeans planted throughout the United States? As you said, you know, you guys do want to innovate and find more ways to get this done. What's in your mind? What does the United States look like? How do you paint that picture for people if that were to happen? You know, and I would say, I'm sure you'll address this, but also, what are we going to do with the hundreds of millions of animals that are out there? All the jobs and the workers, and I know you guys have thought all this through, but there's loads and loads of questions with a transformation like that.
These are great questions and ones we think a lot about. I think, you know, what do I see as the future of the global food supply chain and the U.S. food supply chain? I think there's going to be a lot more diversity in the crops that we grow. You're looking at this right now. So Impossible, we've been around now for 9 years, but we've been in market less than 4. We put a lot of research in developing this platform. In the last 4 years, it went from a handful of companies working on this to hundreds to probably thousands globally. And I think what that makes it, you know, that encourages me a lot that, you know, everybody's going to be looking for different solutions and creating different products that are going to hit, you know, different parts of the needs for consumers. And I think that if you look at, now you bring that back to the farm level, right now there's not there's not very many plant-based crops, and the scale plant-based crops were mostly done for animal consumption. That's going to change. And so I think if I go back to my farming life as a farmer, I always say this, farmers are probably the most entrepreneurial people in the world. Like, you have to make a business that's extremely hard and do it with no money. So go. And it's like, farmers are always looking for the right opportunities. They're looking to produce good food for people. And I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities to transform our system and actually create a much more diverse, robust system than we have today that is reliant on, a handful of crops.
Gotcha. What's that? You came from a farming family. What's the change in lifestyle? What's the change in, like I said, if I picture, I picture a different landscape, a different way. I know 2/3 of our nation is non-arable. Like, we can't plant it. Paint that, I really want folks to be able to see kind of what that life looks like in 2035. We'll probably all be virtual reality by then anyway. But, I think it's important really for people to understand the vision.
Yeah, our vision is a lot of that land that's not planted, we are still using somewhat in any way we possibly can for agriculture, because there's that much pressure on the land. And I'm seeing places of like land that probably shouldn't be used that, the farmers admit in 10, 20 years, the water's gone and the land's done. It's going to be barren. And it's like, that's what we cannot allow to happen. And so we have to take that pressure off. And a lot of that land should go back to native vegetation, which is going to pull greenhouse gases out of the air. It's going to let natural wildlife come back. And there's a lot of studies showing that once you pull like land, out of like cultivation or use in agricultural systems and you let it grow back, the ecosystem does recover relatively quickly. And so I think that's what I see there. And then, in the agricultural sphere, I think it's going to be a much wider, diverse set of crops and opportunities. And I think it can change really fast then, because one of the challenges with animals too is the system moves very slow. You have to raise a beef cow for 16 to 20 months typically. Every species is a bit different, but it's a very slow process in general. With plants, you can go directly to the crop that the animals eat, but now you can take that and you can create a lot of innovation from that and create a much more diverse set of food opportunities and foods for people. And like what you love and what I love is going to be different. And I think we're going to have a lot more ability to cater the agricultural system and the products to what consumers really want.
Yeah. Does this, this brings to mind things like regenerative agriculture and no-till drilling and really soil ecology. Do you guys think much about that and think about like the implication of expanding conventional agriculture?
I think that is, somewhat the impetus of, why we exist. We can't continue to expand the conventional agricultural system the way we have. We're already using a lot of marginal land that really shouldn't be used for that. So, all the global like prime land areas are typically already in agriculture. And a lot of those probably even shouldn't be. And it'd be ideal to get those back into some sort of native vegetation. I think, for us, things like regenerative agriculture, there might be some small benefits to it compared to the conventional system, but it's still very fundamentally flawed. The use of animals to produce food and for humans at this scale is just a fundamentally flawed idea. I grew up in that system, and I realized that. And even being in that system, I didn't realize how flawed it was at the time. But looking back at it, it's like, it's pretty clear. It can be a way of life for farmers, and that's what it was for my family. And I think that's why it's really on us to continue to help the whole agricultural system evolve with us as we grow. But as a production technology, it's just very inefficient, it's dirty, and it's very unsafe to compare to other stuff that we can do.
Yeah, we could be on this forever, but only a few more minutes with you, so we'll keep moving through these questions I have for you. But I think when we talk about your product specifically, because I think a lot of what you've said will resonate with people in terms of the issues with our food systems, and it's been laid bare with our COVID-19 crisis as well. But what is the intention and even maybe the justification for using terms like meat and beef and pork and things that you guys do in your marketing, and really the whole idea of the company is around this replacement therapy in a way for folks that eat meat currently?
Yeah, I think the terms beef and pork is an experience, and so what experience you're kind of looking for as a consumer. For us, is I don't know if you've had like Impossible in retail yet, but it's like, the fastest growing part of our business. And you'll look and it's like, it's Impossible burger made from plants. And it's in very big, bold text. And I think it's really important for us to message that our products, are coming from plants because it is a big part of the value proposition. And it also helps us continue to spread the message that, hey, you really don't need to get that experience from an animal. We can give you that same experience without the environmental challenges, with a much more nutritious profile. And I think that's a key message that you have. Now, from a messaging side, people are looking at us, okay, if we were going to create something, we get asked this question all the time. I was like, why didn't you create something like completely new to the world that no one's ever had before? And it's like, eventually, yes, you're totally right. We will do that because we can do that. But it's harder to train and like help consumers and chefs and distributors and everybody understand what products are if they don't have some sort of proxy to equate it to. And so you kind of start with that proxy to equate it to. It's a set market. The ground beef market, obviously in the US is massive, and globally ground meats are huge. And so you have a set market where consumers are looking for an experience like that. And so it's a good starting point before you get to creating something completely new that, I don't know, maybe what do you want? Is there something like crazy out there that you'd love to have?
Oh man, we talked about this. This is one thing we talked about. Like I said at the beginning, I talked about this a couple of, like a dozen episodes ago with the founder of our company. The company's called Meat Eater, so I like where we are. With our founder, Steven Ranella, and we both said, kind of simultaneously thought, listen, as a hunter, I prefer things that are good for ecosystems and natural habitats because I need that. I need that for the animals that are my source of protein. We have a different supply chain as hunters. The supply chain is healthy ecosystems, federal agencies to manage wildlife populations, and our ability to access wild places. So that's our supply system. So there is a connection there to healthy ecosystems and land and water, clean land and a clean water for us to recreate, but also to get our source of food. And so for us, is if we're not getting, I've been doing this for decades, and so has Steve. If we're not going to get our meat from that source, we would much rather shirk, the factory farming, proxy meat suppliers, and either go, I would go to a local butcher or go to a local co-op or get the meat out of the woods. This is what I feel. And so with your product, my thing is, I want a good faith representation of what this is. I would rather eat a plant-based meat that is healthier for me and has nutrients and is good for the environment than eat meat from a factory farm. But it just feels disingenuous, to be quite honest, and it feels like you're maybe playing down to the consumer rather than playing up to the aspiration.
Yeah, and it's very important to play up to the aspiration. I think you have to be careful a bit to not be too preachy in what you're doing. Is because we're offering a solution. We're offering a great product for consumers to enjoy, and that's what's going to drive the transformation more than anything else. Yeah. And so it has to be around great products first that consumers feel comfortable with. And a lot of what we do and why we do even podcasts like this is to help people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we do it. Like we have people and reporters come into our production site and videotape the entire production line. And it's like, we do that because one, we're really proud of it. We're very proud of what we do, and we want to, debunk some of the myths and the questions and everything else that everybody has. Because it is, it's different than the traditional meat production system. And so it is our job to help educate you and all consumers.
Yeah, like I said, you have an interested consumer in me. I'm not against the product at all. If you guys have any like focus groups and you want to tell them what I said, just tell them I'm looking for the future product that you're going to make that says Plant Slab, whatever. Probably come up with a better name than that.
I'm sure our team could.
I trust you. That really just connects with me on an intellectual level. What you're proposing, as you well know, is a gigantic shift in and not only the way that we treat the world and feed ourselves, but in our humanity as well. And I think it is nice to hear that you guys necessarily aren't saying everybody stop eating meat tomorrow, and making that argument based on sentience and some of the ideas of veganism. But I mean, all that stuff gets kind of mixed together here, I think, for most regular folks that are listening to what you're saying. So how do you kind of walk people through that? We're not, we're not going to outlaw meat for everybody, so you eat our product, but we're trying to give you an alternative, which is what I'm hearing from you, and I'm happy to hear that.
And that's the only way. We're not going to tell people to stop eating meat. I mean, food and enjoyment and like nutrition, all that stuff goes together. You can't change culture that fast. And I think it wouldn't be the right way to just go out there and say, everybody stop eating meat. Honestly, it's not going to accomplish what we're trying to do. And, some countries have tried that. Some countries have actually said, we want everybody to eat 50% less meat, and it hasn't changed. Yeah. And the only way to change this is to produce products that are better, and better means more delicious. And we're getting better every day. We're essentially getting to the point where we're almost caught up to the cow. So in blind taste tests, it's head on head, but we're going to pass the cow. Then more nutritious, which we can do because we have a lot more control. Like an animal's not made to make food and they can't really change the nutrition. We can continue to make our products even more and more nutritious as we go. And then as we scale, we're still small compared to, of course, the industrial agricultural system around meat, but we're so much more efficient. We have to be more affordable. And then once all those come into play, and then of course more sustainable, but that's kind of a no-brainer at this point. And all those come in, it's a very easy choice for the consumer. And that's our job, is to make it a very easy choice and give them, more value on what you eat.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a ton of sense. The other thing for me is, you guys, and you've said this, a lot of you guys are in it to change the world, in it to change how we approach things. That's a big challenge. Does that ever come in your long time with the company? Does that come up against the scalability of a product, come against the quality of the product? Did you guys ever have to cut corners? I know I've read a lot where people are accusing you of this. There was a writer I wrote this down. This guy Mark Bittman, who was a popular food writer. I was reading some of his stuff. He was a New York Times columnist for a while. He's been pushing Americans to eat less meat for some time. He said he criticized meats like Impossible Meat. He said it's the new higher tech vegan meats. They don't address the resource use and hyper processing. And processed food is a term that's thrown around quite a lot. How do you guys think about scalability, save the world versus give people a healthy option here? Don't cut corners.
Well, I think you're always optimizing for multiple factors. You can't just consume one. You can create the most healthy, nutritious, like almost like medicine in a burger patty, effectively solution, and no one's going to eat it because it's probably going to taste horrible. It's like, that's not going to get you anywhere. You can make something that's really bad for people that tastes amazing, and that I also don't think that's going to get you anywhere. And so we follow some very basic principles as a company that we adhere to. Is the products that we produce will be as nutritious or more nutritious and healthy than what we replace. Our team we have more than 120 scientists working on the development and the health and nutrition and everything of the product every day. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be like a kale salad. It's like, if you want to have a kale salad, more power to you, but that's not really what consumers are necessarily looking for. And so I think we're always balancing all the sensory properties you need between taste, texture, aroma, versatility as you cook, the nutritional properties, and scalability. If we produce a product that you can't actually produce and feed more than 5 people, that also doesn't do you any good. Yeah. And so all those factors have to come into play and work together. And the truth, like the food system itself right now, it's going to change a lot. And it can't change a lot over time. Is we have ideas and technologies of how to scale even more nutritious, better crops for farmers, but it takes years and years to build new supply chains. And if we are going to wait for that, then we're going to be missing out on a lot of the opportunity, the impact that we have on people's lives. And it's like, our job is to have that positive impact on people's lives as soon as we can.
Yeah. Do you guys think about the future in that way? Do you think about if you had to hedge in one direction or the other as you try to make these vast changes? Do you hedge toward the scalability? Would you say, like, I would much rather have more out there and figure out additional vitamins or additional nutrients or additional way to make this healthy? Because it certainly seems that way. I don't think of Burger King as a place that's trying to make me healthy necessarily. I mean, every once in a while they dip into that world. And so there's some cognitive dissonance for me in terms of being in Burger King and then trying to feed the world in a different way. And I think that's something when I talk to a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, and people that were just interested in talking to a guy like you, I think that's a big part of it is getting across the threshold of, yes, going into Burger King, I'm sure replaced a lot of factory farmed meats hitting the table or hitting the wrapper of an American consumer. But at the same time, you're partnering with a brand that ain't the most high-minded when it comes to feeding people.
Well, I think it's for us. There's certain things in that we can control and we can help, and we'll push forward. So, like of our product, our product directly, we have less fat, less saturated fat, more are essentially the same amount of protein, same amount of bioavailable protein. Heme is iron, which is the most bioavailable in the human diet. We put all the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals in you expect to get from meat. And we don't have any cholesterol, hormones, or antibiotics, and many other things that you really don't want to get from meat that just happen to be there. As a product team and what we're going to produce, that's what we can control. Now, if you look at a place like Burger King, it's a great opportunity to reach consumers that are already going to Burger King. And if we can give them something that is better than what is there before, that's a win. Is major fast food the proponent of healthy diets in the world? No, that's typically not essentially the main MO. Of course, they are you'll see all of them getting more into the healthy lifestyles over time as consumers want it. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to helping consumers drive the change, because businesses are always going to be looking to build their business, and if consumers want the change, drive the change, choose the more healthy options, that helps the industry evolve with it. And that's part of our job, is to create products that are more nutritious, and then it'll help consumers then come along that path with us, and then help the rest of the system change too.
Yeah.
But coming back to the agricultural system too, you can't change everything at once.
Yeah. It feels, like I said, it feels like the hedge, and I think that's what you're saying, like the hedge is towards getting it out into and letting the consumers make a choice. It's, I think that we should talk a little bit about the shortage that you guys had, just because as I try to picture 2035 and people try to wrap their heads around this, I think those are important points.
Yeah.
How much are you guys really working to make this the healthiest thing possible? I don't know that I could eat. I don't know. You may answer this. I don't know this for sure, that I could eat 2 Impossible burgers a day from Burger King and be a healthy person. I don't know that. It doesn't seem like I could. I've not tried it, but how do you guys look at that part?
Well, I think to your point on scalability and the shortage that we had in 2019. Our sales took off much faster than we had predicted, and we essentially ended up, in somewhat breaking our system. And so we had our Oakland facility running. Our Oakland facility was scaling up, and it became very clear. And we just, didn't get quite ahead of it as much as we needed to. And so now we have a couple lines at our Oakland site. We have a partnership with a group called OSI. And, coming back to systems and systems change, OSI is one of the largest meat manufacturers in the world. They have 65 production sites, and, our process was able to, work with their process, pretty interchangeably. And so we have dedicated lines there now in, multiple factories, and that's how you scale. And in order to do this, we essentially need to double production in almost every year.
Yeah.
And so we're putting a lot of effort into building a really scalable supply chain, scalable production system to be able to do that. And as a young growing company, I've been part of, many young growing food companies, whether directly or indirectly, and production challenges hit pretty much every one of them, because you're creating a physical good, right? And you're not going to take shortcuts in how you create a physical good. Your safety measures, your quality, you have to maintain that top notch no matter what, because that's what you're giving that experience to consumers. And that's something you can't compromise on. And for us, it's yes, it was painful to go through the shortage. It's definitely painful for our customers and our consumers. But we're going to make the trade-off to make sure we're producing the top quality product all the time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're close to being able to let you go here. But before I let you go, I think we had a vegan philosophy professor on recently. We were talking about kind of what is the prescription for this large scale issue that you see and that he sees, that I see. I think you would be blind not to see it. And what I told him is what hunting has taught me is kind of a proximity mindset when it comes to my food. A backyard garden is better than the grocery store. An elk on the mountain is better than proxy meat provider at a store. That's my philosophy, and I think most hunters understand that. And hunting has driven me to garden and do all kinds of other things. And what I would ask you is how does the Impossible Burger kind of address that? Is the supply chain so long and there's so much processing and manufacturing going on with this product? Is the proximity to the final product as long, if not longer, than factory farm meats? Have you guys thought about that? How close to the products these people are eating that they should be?
Yeah, I think all food pretty much will, even what you hunt eventually is processed to a certain extent. And now you're part of that process. You're much more connected to it than you would if I were to go to a grocery store and buy something. Like even for me, as like I grew up in the farming community, we knew the names of everything that we ate. And that was just kind of, part of life. And that was what I was used to. And when I went to Minneapolis and to San Francisco and going grocery shopping, I didn't have that. I actually felt this dissonance and not really knowing where my food came from. That actually drove me to eat less meat. And then once I found out more about the environmental side of it is like, then it's like, okay, my job is being an environmental steward of the world. And that's how I want to live my life. And it's like, I can't really justify personally eating meat. Now, I think from the process on our side is we're extremely proud of the process that we've developed. There's many processes in food that produce products that are not good for you. And I think there's a bad rap on some of that for some very valid reasons. There's also like whether it's bread, yogurt, really everything in the food system is processed to a certain extent. It's whether you can back up your process, give the transparency into what that is, and help consumers understand it. And to your last point on the length is like we essentially skip the animal as part of that food system. And so instead of taking the crops that you grow, feed into an animal, which take months to years to grow, and then you process that animal, we essentially go directly to the plants and we go directly to human nutrition. And so the length of our supply chain is much shorter than anything in an animal agricultural system you can do, which enables us to also adapt faster, when things change.
So why is that? Why is it shorter necessarily? Like what's the could you take people quickly through how it gets from, raw materials to store shelves? Is that too long a question to ask? Or is it...
Yeah, sure. So I guess if you take, you can use a simple crop that's probably well understood, like a soybean. And so if you grow soybeans in the summer in Minnesota, you'll grow them for a few months, you'll harvest them, and then you'll take them to a dryer or into a granary, and then they either go to a farm for animal feed. Mm-hmm. You'll like grind it and put it into meal and put it into animal feed, or you take that and you grind it and you put it into human nutrition. And so if you put it into animal feed, then you have that step of using an animal. And so if you're taking a cow, for instance, or a pig, let's say a cow, which is more what I'm familiar with since that's the agricultural system I grew up with, and you're taking it to like beef is like you're anywhere from 16 months to a few years, depending on the system you're running, from when that animal starts growing, when they eat the feed, to when you would actually harvest it and then process it and go forward. Or if Impossible, you don't have that step. You go directly to the human nutrition. So we can take the proteins, the fats, the micronutrients, and all the stuff directly from those crops and directly make products and deliver it to you within days, instead of many times months and years.
Got it. Well, let me hit you with a bunch of yes or no questions before we let you go. Hopefully these will be easy. We'll see. Is Impossible Meat the company, and you can answer for the company or yourself or both, against eating meat holistically? I think we've already covered that, but it's been nice to have.
I think we already covered that. We are creating better meat, so we are not against that.
Got it. Do you guys feel you're on track to meet your 2035 goal of eliminating animals from food production? We are very early, I would say. So I think the yes and no.
I think we have a lot to do. I don't know if I can. Yeah.
I do. I will say I appreciate, as an aside, I appreciate kind of the way you're approaching this, because I wondered, I don't know you at all, and I wondered and I've read a lot of bombastic things from your CEO, and I appreciate kind of your openness to say, like, don't know, we're working on it, we're going to get better, while also addressing like the global issues. I just genuinely appreciate that. I wondered if I was going to feel like I should have had more data, but I don't. I feel like you're working through it.
Yep. And I think that's part of the mission in our North Star is extremely clear on what we need to get to. And that really drives everybody at the company. In order to drive a change this big that can have as positive impact on the world and people's lives as we are going to have, we can't, if we thought we knew everything, we're going to run ourselves into the ground. We have to be learning every single day. And
do you find
conversations like this.
Do you find the work environment to be that way? I mean, you guys have to scale. You got to make money. There's a lot of pressure. The mission itself begets lots of pressures.
It does.
What's the environment like? What's the culture like? Is everybody so laser focused, or is there times to relax and take a look at what you've already done, or what's it like there?
Yeah, it's a great question, because many of our core values, one of them is we're responsible. Like, as a company, each person and us as a company is responsible to make this happen, which is a lot of pressure. And I think that's a lot of reasons why people are there, is they want to be part of this. They want to, in some ways, have that pressure. But it also is really important for us to find ways to step back and celebrate and relax when you can do it. And I think you can ask my teams, but I grew up on a dairy farm where you work 365 days of the year. So for me, it's like, this is almost like normal. And they're like, it's like, we have to make sure we've created environments where no matter what your background, what drives you, you have a way to succeed. And I think over time we've gotten better and better at that. And so I think culturally, I've talked to a lot of friends on this. The culture when you're 10 people versus the culture when you're 600 people has to be different.
Oh yeah.
And there's certain values for us as a company that we will always adhere to. But our culture is always evolving. People work really hard. People support each other, because I think we are in such a shared mission behind that North Star. But yeah, of course, it's we're working hard at this every day. It is a lot of long hours at different times, but you're in it for like the better for the world, the better for yourselves, the better for your family, and I think that's really motivating to everyone.
Yeah. I always, like I said, I run in a culture of people that are working at a place called Meat Eater. And I have always tried to fight the idea to demonize something, one, that you don't understand, or in our case, feels, I think, as I've taken a straw poll around the office, feels unnatural, is like the thing that most people have told me. Like this, you're taking plants, you're adding in vitamins and nutrients, and you're kind of messing around with what you're looking at, and then you're putting something in to make sure it bleeds. That's the thing, again, if you got focus groups over there of like guys and gals like me who really care about their consumption and really want to, I rely on healthy ecosystems to do what I do. And so that's the one thing I think I would say, and that others that I've talked to says, like, this isn't a part of the sets and links of our humanity that have driven us to this point. It is a radical idea. And it just feels unnatural. So the more you guys can do to address that question and to talk about it really logically as you have here, I think would be a good thing.
And I think you're connected more to the natural world than the vast majority of global citizens. Being in Montana, I think you have that ability some more than others just in general. There's a lot of parts, and definitely within the meat supply chain that just is very unnatural. Very unnatural, the way that we use animals the way we do today to produce food. And, we have to change that.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a big job ahead of you. Like I said, I appreciate your candor. And I really, like I said, I wondered how our conversation would go, and I'm glad it went. I'm glad that you were as open as you were. I felt like, and honest as you were as well. So we're going to continue to explore this on the show. We're going to talk to other folks in regenerative agriculture and try to compare and contrast your ideas with theirs and let people make up their own decisions. So I'm glad you were able to kind of state your case and explain your position. My final question Did you get a lot of shit from your family for living in Hong Kong and working at Impossible?
Yeah, it's very different than the small town farm life. And I think it was funny when we were starting the company. My first call is to my brother. My brother is like, he's been in animal agriculture his whole life. His like legacy was to take over the farm. And you know, he's the one where I got that quote essentially about what farmers do too, because he kind of came back at this and say that, you know, the family farm that we grew up with, that way of life, you know, it doesn't really exist anymore. You really can't make a living that way. It's all big mass systems you're trying to compete with. And our job as farmers is to produce, you know, good food for people and continue to hand down our land, hand down our farms to future generations. And honestly, that's not happening. It's like that system just is broken the way the world has evolved. You know, feed 7 billion going on 10 billion people. Like those systems are breaking down or mostly have broken down. And so in a lot of ways, what we're doing at Impossible is we're trying to create a better system versus the way the systems essentially evolved to over the last, you know, couple hundred years. And, you know, I've been able to have him help and, you know, other, you know, people, farmers all around the country and world help think about, you know, what are the future crops we can grow? What are the future ecosystems we can build? And I think that's where I get very encouraged by the farming community because they are extremely entrepreneurial, looking for things like this and saying, okay, I see the opportunity. I can see why this is good for me. And as a farmer, you still have to make money to make a living, which is one of the hardest things. And I can see like this is a better way to do this. And I think, yeah, that gives me a lot of encouragement.
That's good. That's a good answer. I think as we go forward, you're an interesting case study for these ideas.
Sure.
It seems to me, I don't want to mischaracterize what you're saying. Like, I think we're going to talk to some folks within this conversation that want to take our current system and kind of build on it and work on it and refine it. Would you characterize your version? I just want to make sure we're clear as breaking down the system and rebuilding it completely.
Yeah, I think, you know, everybody who's working to make something even incrementally better in the short term is doing good. We have to fundamentally change the way we produce food. We have to. That's the only way that people can have the meat, fish, and dairy experiences that they have today and that they want at the global scale we're doing. We have to completely fundamentally change the way we produce this food.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Nick. I don't know, what time is it in Hong Kong?
7:50 a.m.
All right. Well, I was going to say have a good night, but have a good day. I really appreciate your time and your experience, and hopefully we can connect as we, you know, explore this further. And maybe I'll be tasting more of your meat here coming up.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Take care.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Robbie, how's it going?
Hey Ben, how you doing?
Good, man. I'm doing just good. We are just so you know, we're just coming off. Listeners will have just listened to our interview with Nick Holla from Impossible Meats. A good interview. You've listened to it. I sent you the audio and let you listen to kind of how Nick framed some of the things he was talking about. And so I wanted to just dive right in with you. We've had you on. You were on this last fall. We were up there at Rome Ranch. Had a great time. Had a good hunt. I still the COVID knocked down my chance to come hunt turkeys with you guys over there this year, which I'm really bummed about.
Yeah, major bummer. We were looking forward to that as well.
I know. So, but I wanted to have you on specifically to talk about what I view is maybe not a counterpoint, but another perspective in this idea of plant-based meats and plant agriculture and animal agriculture and where we go in the future. And so I know we've had a few whiskeys and talked about this before, and we've talked on other occasions. I really find your perspective on regenerative agriculture and what you guys do at Force of Nature Meats very profound and very well thought out. So I just wanted to present your other side, as it were, and see where we go. Sound good?
Yeah, man. Thanks again for having me on another occasion. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. I think it's really important, and I also think it's incredibly important that you're creating the opportunity to have a complete and honest conversation, right? I mean, too many times this stuff gets down into confusing stats and data points that are spun, and there isn't the opportunity to really talk about the complete picture. And I think that you do a really great job of creating a environment where that can happen. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, thanks, man. Can you give people a quick your job title and kind of what you do at Force of Nature, and refresh people's memory about Force of Nature Meats itself?
Yeah, so at Force of Nature, I'm one of the co-founders. I'm also the CEO, and I also have some animals. I consider myself a land steward. And then Force of Nature, again, we talked about at length what we are doing on a previous episode, but ultimately, after spending the better part of the last decade or so focused on improving our food system, we realized that the best way to resolve many of the major global health and environmental crises that we face today is through improving our food system, and particularly the way that we practice agriculture. And within Force of Nature, we're primarily focused on accelerating the creation of a global regenerative supply network. And that ultimately will address a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, but also give consumers access to better food, as well as an opportunity to vote for a better food system. Simultaneously with, again, Force of Nature, meat is under attack. I think as you are well aware, and I think in many instances unfairly under attack, right? And so we say one of our objectives is to reclaim the legacy of meat. And that means both from the conventional incumbents who have continued to invest in a system with known challenges and limitations, largely in the name of profits, as well as in these new kind of up and coming, we'll call them alternative food companies, and in many ways that are falsely prophesizing that they're solutions for problems that they aren't offering solutions for. And I think we need to bring meat back to what it has been for the through the prior millennia, and not what it maybe has become over the last couple of generations, since really the Industrial Revolution and even World War II.
Yeah. Would you say as we think about this, we think about Impossible Meats and Force of Nature and companies like this, that you're looking for better, in your case, better meat, but better food altogether, better food systems, and then over top of all that is addressing environmental issues and climate change. Is that a good way to kind of put the umbrella over everything here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. I think the focus for a lot of people right now, I mean, is better food, as you said, and more sustainable food, whether that be from the impact on the environment broadly, not just greenhouse gases, also on food stability and food security, as well as on rural communities and habitat and things like that. So there's definitely a tremendous opportunity to improve all of those things, right? And that's what we've done in agriculture historically, is evolve it. And there's an opportunity right now to take learnings and to take the advancements we have, being as experienced as we are, and evolve the system once more.
Yeah. So it's evolve and change, and I think that where we ended with Nick, and where I think we can start with you. I asked him this at the end, as folks listening have already heard, and you and I have talked about this, but I think what it seems from the Impossible Meat side of things, and we can talk about how much you kind of know about them and your awareness level, but it seems to me that they want to tear the system down and rebuild it. That's what Nick said. That's what their CEO has said publicly. They're in for wholesale change, and they've stated their reasons why they feel that's necessary. We'll talk about some of those as well, but how do you guys approach a better food system and a more sustainable food system? Is it to tear down the system, or is it to build on what we already have? How do you articulate that as a company, as a land steward too?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't think the answer is to tear anything down. I think what we have right now is founded on 4.5 billion years of evolution. And that's a pretty strong starting point, right? I think we've made, with the best of intentions, gone down a path that has generated some unforeseen consequences. And in the recent times, we've begun to identify what some of those are, and there's been resistance to acknowledging or making the changes that are overdue, right? And so I think there's always pros and cons in the food system, but the advancements since, like we talked about a second ago, World War II, have really kind of brought us into the chemical industrial agriculture age. For them, their point, I'm not an expert on them, and they can make their own case, right? But what I hear from their CEO largely and in the press is that meat is the enemy, and they want to put all resources into industrial row crop agriculture. And our premise and point is that industrial agriculture of all kinds is challenged, and it can be quickly and easily improved. The answer is not to tear it down; it's to course correct or evolve it, like we talked about, right? I think some of the opportunities that we have to evolve those practices need only be subtle changes to generate a powerful force, and really ultimately address a myriad of major issues, right? Whether it be health of humans, environmental impact, welfare of animals, again, impact on rural America, food stability, all the stuff that we talked about. And we're trying to improve the overall system and the well-being of all that are involved, not just today, but to create, a sustainable future.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting dichotomy, right? That sustainability is a word, efficiency is a word that Nick used a lot, sustainability is a word you hear a lot. And I think both Impossible and your company, Force of Nature, we're not here to compare them, as you told me. They're definitely different companies at different phases of their growth, but philosophically, I think is what we can touch on anyway. Because I think, honestly, if I was being honest with you, I thought that the way that Nick was articulating some of his points reminded me of kind of like the passion and the clarity with which you articulate your points. So I felt that it's a nice juxtaposition, but also that there's passionate people trying to solve these things. So when I look at Force of Nature's website, when I look at Impossible's website, both have literature and verbiage talking about combating climate change. Both are openly driven to combat climate change and save the environment. So how would you approach, your version of that? And then as much as you want to go into kind of analyzing their version, you're welcome to, but I think more just focusing on regenerative agriculture and what you guys believe.
Yeah, no, I think that's climate change or carbon issues are definitely something that resonates with the general population and certainly with news media, right? And so I think it's a more popular point in the conversation, and I'm happy to dive into to go really deep into that, right? Talk about specific carbon impacts of regenerative agriculture, as well as the conventional agriculture system that they are promoting and hoping to perpetuate, right? I do want to clarify though that it's more than just greenhouse gases. I think part of it is pointing to the absolute worst example of animal production and assigning that to the entire industry. And then using that as sort of a straw man, right, to make an argument, and then using some convenient statistical analysis techniques to make points based off of antiquated data to support an opinion, right, or really even more than that, and an ideology. I think really when you want to point out what where our two companies are similar and different. Where we're different is they are the conversation that we're having is about conventional agriculture versus regenerative agriculture, right? And conventional agriculture is tied to both plant and animal-based systems, right? And so what they're promoting is the reliance on an industrial chemical agriculture system for plants and animals. They're simply suggesting that we shift anything that has to do with animals over to the plant side, from one evil to another, so to speak. It's theoretical, it's counter to biology and science. It will continue to degrade soil, it will continue to degrade land, it will create less healthy food, it will increase those greenhouse gas emissions that we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. And our suggestion is simply transition to a more regenerative approach that works alongside and in conjunction with nature to improve both our plant and animal-based food systems. Right? So it's not the animal, it's the system. We're simply replacing conventional chemistry-based agriculture with a biology and management-based approach. This is validated historically and in present contexts, right? I mean, you have numerous scientific professionals, the scientific community is supporting regenerative agriculture. Major governments all over the world are supporting it. This isn't something that I or my associates came up with on a sabbatical, right? This is something that's been around for a long time, is widely supported, is proven out, and is truly scalable.
Yeah. Do you see when you think about regenerative agriculture? I think we should probably, for those who haven't listened to our last podcast, take a minute, go do that. And we're back.
Yeah, sure.
And we're back. Now we're back.
Okay.
Assuming everyone has listened to it now. But give people just a couple of lines about regenerative agriculture. I don't want to go too much further without kind of tying that loose end off. I know I'm asking you to explain a very detailed thing, but philosophically, you've already touched on the approach of regenerative. Give people an overview of how it's just different than plant-based agriculture as we know it today and animal-based agriculture.
Yeah, and again, so it's not plant-based, it's not animal-based, it's what I would consider to be planet-based, right, or ecosystem-based agriculture, where it's subtle, but we're replacing chemical inputs with management practices, right, and it's agriculture guided in nature's image, working with nature as opposed to in a combative form with it, right. And for those that were able to click away and listen to the last episode and come back, you'll understand, and we'll talk more about it throughout this podcast, I'm sure. But you can have all the PhDs you want, and I'll take nature. And it doesn't matter what the issue is, I'm going to win the long game, right? The simple truth is we can work with nature or against it, and we've chosen to side with nature. And the most conventional form of agriculture, which Impossible absolutely relies on and is intent to perpetuate, is combative towards nature. And in our podcast, we discuss some of the basic fundamentals and the foundational elements of that. It starts from the ground up. It starts from the soil. There are principles of soil health, limiting disturbance, keeping the soil covered and not bare, maintaining living roots throughout the year so you can have this plant, atmosphere beneath the soil, relationship of energy and nutrition, promoting diversity, and absolutely incorporating animals in conjunction with diversity of plants together.
Yeah. And I know, like I said earlier, we'd be transparent. I did send you the file of Nick's interview because I wanted you to kind of hear it and be able to kind of digest it. We're not going to go through it point by point, but when you listen to the way, when I was talking to him about supply chain and proximity to our food, when you listen to the way he explained that, how did it strike you and compared to, what you guys are doing with your meat and regenerative agriculture?
I think the challenge with proximity, I'll be honest, I didn't make an extensive list of notes on the conversation you had with him because I think it seems to be pretty consistent with their base talking points. And I think the things that stood out to me were the discussion more about efficiency when you were talking proximity, and what's more efficient, right? It's really hard to get my head around the position that they've taken, right? That you can take and promote this conventional system that's relying on so many herbicide, fungicide, pesticide inputs, heavy tillage, fossil fuels, tractors back and forth, harvesting a crop, drying it, further processing it, creating an ultra processed food product, probably the most processed food product in the history of our species, and make an argument that is in any way more efficient than having a cow or a ruminant animal in a pasture, living in a thriving ecosystem, providing ecosystem services, upcycling protein in a way that, again, we've evolved for millions of years to support. That happens without any effort, every day, all around the world, and the few functioning ecosystems we have left. I can't think of anything more efficient than that. Yeah. And I can't think of any way of it involving PhDs, intellectual property, laboratories, more processing, more transportation that will cause that to be more efficient.
Yeah, well, so you're shifting a little bit, because I think this is an important part of this as we move through it, but shifting a little bit to the idea of the term meat, right? Because I heard from Nick a couple of times that the way we treat animals right now is unnatural. And again, my opinion aside, there may or may not be a straw man there, but that's his point, was that what we do with animal agriculture right now is unnatural in and of itself. So inside of that, he's also talking about what we call these things. You have a company that sells meat, and according to him, he has a company that sells quote unquote meat. So how do you look at that? How do you look at the intention and justification of using a term like meat? They use the term beef and pork and other things. I know you've heard their CEO explain it and probably heard Nick explain it. How do you walk through that logically? Because I struggle with it, and I told Nick that. I absolutely struggle with this part of it.
Yeah, I get it. I get why they're doing it, right? They're trying to, they would probably say convince, I would say deceive consumers that, they're creating a product that is familiar and natural and safe and honest. But it doesn't take long to look up, the definition of meat to find out that that's not what they're creating. It's a large industry that they want to take share from, and they're trying to do it in the most efficient way with the most savvy marketing. I mean, really, it's just sort of rinse and repeat the playbook of any major multi-billion-dollar international corporation, right? A little bit of misdirection, a little bit of lack of transparency, and a lot of telling people what they want to hear.
Yeah. What do you got? What do you tell people? When people come to you and say, "Why should I buy meat from Force of Nature?" That has baked within it this idea of regenerative agriculture and this idea of doing things a different way, a better way. How do you explain the value proposition there?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches, and it's a complicated conversation. It's really hard to have because there's so many things that are impacted and paths to take. I think that the starting point is, if we want to be able to have healthy food in the future, we need to make some changes. If we want to be able to have widely available food in the future in the form that we know it today, we need to make some changes. If we want to have farmers in rural communities across the world growing our food, who we trust and have our best interest at heart, we need to make some changes. If we want to reverse the recent trend of the current generation of children having shorter life expectancies than the parents, we need to make some changes, right? And so the reality is we've gone from, we talked about, intensive agriculture, chemical agriculture. Again, there's myriads of challenges it creates in the ecosystem that mean there's a shelf life. That is not something that we can continue to do indefinitely. We are degrading our lands. We are desertifying our lands. We're losing our topsoils. We have to figure out a way to rebuild or regenerate those lands if we want to continue to produce food on them. We've also lost nutrition, right? We've lost that bioavailability of that nutrition in our food. And it turns out that healthy functioning ecosystems that created the fertility we've been mining for the last 2 generations can be rebuilt to return that nutrition, right? So, if you have a vested interest in the human species continuing to populate this planet, I have the best solution for you.
Yeah. And it sounds, as I talked to Nick and we've talked, and even this conversation, hearing you talk there, I would say, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that you're preaching kind of a return to a natural order. They, it seems, are preaching a new world order, especially, juxtaposed to what we have right now in terms of animal agriculture. So is that how you see it? Is that a good way to characterize these things?
Actually, I'll say no. I agree with your sentiment on the approach they're trying to take. New in the sense of eliminating one of the most fundamental food sources for all life on this planet through all time. But not new in the sense of relying on one of the most devastating food systems that we've ever seen on this planet. For us, it's not about turning the clock back necessarily. It's about looking back and taking lessons from the past. We have made tremendous advancements in science and biology and all of the sciences that study human evolution and our co-evolvement and the environment around us. We can apply those advancements to how we practice agriculture. So it's not simply we need to go back to how it was. It's more like we need to learn from nature and figure out a way to optimize all of the things that are necessary to promote stability and to avoid scarcity. And promote food security and create those outcomes that we talked about, right? Health and resiliency and sustainability. So there's a new technology component to it, certainly. It's just not technology that's designed to combat nature, right? The existing system, literally, if you think about what a monoculture is, and this is what they promote, right? Hundreds of thousands of square miles, multiple percentage points, 10% of the landmass of the United States alone is corn. Right, that is a single crop, a single organism spread over a vast area. It's absolutely a monoculture. It has destroyed native habitat. It is destroying soil biology. It is destroying biology above the soil. It's causing erosion. It's causing runoff. It's causing pollinator die-off. It's promoting toxins in our water system. It's causing toxins in our food. It's generating dead zones in the ocean. The EPA says soil is the #1 pollutant in our water supply because of the consequences of the way that we practice agriculture. So I'm saying that's a problem. I'm saying we got to acknowledge that problem. We got to look to the lessons of the world around us and say, hey, instead of fighting this thing, which is clearly a losing battle, how can we work with it and apply our incredible potential as a human species to adapt and evolve and take those lessons to create a better system?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the next thing to move to is something that I don't think we got in the recording with Nick, but something him and I talked about afterwards in terms of regenerative agriculture. And I just said, what do you think about regenerative? And his paraphrasing his response that it's a Band-Aid, it's a small measure. it's not scalable. It's not going to be impactful in the way that their version of change will be impactful on a global, international scale. What do you say to that, and how do you scale regenerative?
Yeah, so the scale conversation is the one that, because regenerative is such a powerful tool, and it counters significantly every tactic that they use to attack meat. They try to say, don't look there, it's not scalable, right? The reality is, again, subtle shifts can create a massive change. And in order to finish all of the cattle, as an example, that we have in the United States on grass, and further to even do it in regenerative systems, is absolutely within our grasp, right? Numerous organizations have done research on this to validate it. And just as an example, right, we have millions of acres of land that are used to produce grains and other feed specifically for cattle. We don't need to feed cattle those grains. Cattle can eat things that they can, that forbs and things that they can get off the land, as well as grasses and native ecosystems, right? So we simply take that land and create functioning, healthy ecosystems. We start addressing all the things that we talked about, and we're finishing more animals on grass, right? 500 million acres in the United States is private land or conservation program land with little occupancy of ruminants, right? We know that we've seen decline in native ruminant species. And we know that a lot of private lands don't have animals on them. Without forcing anybody to do anything, just with the promise of saying, hey, we can regenerate your land and improve your diversity, and with management, make the land healthier, and we can also produce food on that land. Even utilizing a small portion of that land can generate a massive opportunity to, again, scale regenerative agriculture and finish ruminants on grass. There's another 500 million acres of land in our monoculture crop system, where, again, if we're adopting regenerative practices, we should be incorporating animals into those lands and allowing them to, at a national scale, feed on the residues, the byproduct of human food production, and create the fertilizer and create the moisture and, provide the nourishment for the rhizosphere, or the life beneath the soil, and do all of the things that we need to do to, again, improve the ecosystem while finishing more animals on grass and in regenerative systems. Just as a silly example, right? There's 80 million acres of corn crops in the U.S., and about 40% of that is strictly raised for the production of ethanol, which is a biofuel. So here we are taking something with an adverse carbon footprint to create an allegedly green product, right? That's an upside down logic, right? What if we just put cattle on that? So not only do we have enough land, we have more than enough land. We have enough land to grow the number of ruminants and finish animals on grass.
Yeah, I think this is something you and I, for fairness, you and I have talked about this before, in terms of Impossible's approach, in terms of the plant-based meat approach. I think it's you've kind of already touched on it there, but I asked Nick, where do if we're going to eliminate animal agriculture, where do the hundreds of millions of animals go that we currently are housing as a country? What happens to the land, the farmers, the community? I asked Nick about his vision for a 2035 America. What does rural Iowa look like if there's no cows walking around and it's all plant-based agriculture? I would ask you this similar question. What's your vision for, decades down the road as we would in this case accelerate regenerative agriculture? What's America look like? What's your vision for everything?
Yeah, I think that we take a more balanced approach to the way that we practice agriculture, right? And we expand the footprint of regenerative agriculture. Again, we need to, in order to continue to produce food. We need to create healthier food. This dichotomy of it's either A or B, it's black or white, it's plants or it's animals, is part of the problem, right? Where in nature do you see thriving ecosystems without animals? Where in nature do you see monocultures, right? These are not natural things. It means that there's lost potential there. So for me, the future looks like farming and ranching in rural and regional areas where we're creating more products than corn and soybeans and wheat that we're exporting all over the planet. Instead, we're returning to creating an abundance of different crops, or I should say a multitude, of different crop foods that we as humans can eat, right? And that we're incorporating animals in a way that promotes the production of that diversity of crops. And that creates a sort of hedging, additional revenue streams for farmers and ranchers. That creates an opportunity to bring in animals where, let's just say that the 40% of food waste that we have in this country, we can be using that to feed some of the monogastrics like chicken and pork, right? And I think that opportunities to identify, space that's not currently being managed, and add animals to it into a system that is being managed thoughtfully will help to rebuild native ecosystems, right? Creating the balance, playing the role of keystone species in nature that we've since removed or that we've since prohibited from playing their role in an ecosystem due to infrastructure like fences and things like that, right? We don't have herds of 60 million plus bison roaming across the entire continent, pushed by wolves, right? We don't have all of these key elements in place to simply just rewild it. We need to be involved in that recovery and that healing process. And there's a way to produce more than enough food to feed ourselves, and to do it in a lasting manner, and to do it in a way that improves our health. And it does not require intensive chemical inputs, and it does not require ultra processed food with synthetics, additives, and oil stabilizers, and all of this garbage that's leading to a health decline across the globe.
Yeah. Do you, there's a lot of, and I think in many of these arguments, not an argument, and many of these issues, I think with Nick and Impossible, with you and Force the Nation from Each, and many other companies that are driving to find solutions to these issues, I want to make sure, as people have probably heard me say in the past, that we're not essentially talking past each other. We're not talking about complete different issues. And one of the good things that's come out of listening to Nick speak and listening to you, Robbie, speak, is that there's a lot of similar language. Biodiversity comes up a lot. Healthy ecosystem comes up a lot. I think a mutual disdain for factory farming seems to be there, at least factory animal agriculture as it is. And so there are a lot of common threads happening here. Do you feel like from where you sit, there's a way for these things to coexist? If it seems like, to me, Impossible would need to come a little bit closer to your end, because they're saying no animal products in our food system at all. But is there a way, do you think, that they can come together, and both of these solution-oriented approaches could work together in a way?
I mean, I don't understand how their approach is a solution to anything. Their approach is based on an ideology of eliminating animals. And they're leveraging a population of people that strongly adheres and is convicted towards promoting that same agenda, in order to promote their own agenda of patenting, technology and turning that into profits. I fail to see anywhere where they're actually proposing solutions to the myriad of challenges that we've been discussing, right? And many of which they even make claims themselves to be, solutions oriented, as you noted, towards, right? So I'd love to know specifically from them to be able to answer that question. What are they doing to improve soil health? What are they actually tactically doing to restore habitat in a way that is legitimate and achievable? How are they combating erosion? How are they combating the intensive use of toxins in our agriculture system that finds its way into our food and into our water? And breast milk, okay?
Yeah.
What are they doing to address dead zones in oceans? What are they doing to address, pollinator collapse? One of the greatest issues facing our global society, and flooding and drought tolerance and so on, right? I mean, they are literally doubling down on the very system that I am trying to fight to change. So I don't see a lot of middle ground, right? I appreciate their conviction towards what they say, right? Trying to create a better meat. I appreciate that they're trying to eliminate the use of animals, but I see nothing in their follow through that's going to actually generate or yield those results. And I actually see disingenuous methods used to cast stones at an industry that is actually providing solutions. And I'd love to talk specifically to some of the things about carbon emissions and water use, because those are some of the most frustrating tactics that they use. And if I can share just how profound the reality is compared to what they say, I think a lot of the listeners would appreciate that as well.
Go for it.
You know, I think I don't want to preach forever about carbon, because again, I think there's so much more. I think when it comes to Impossible specifically, and their stance not only on animal agriculture but specifically regenerative agriculture, you got to look at it in two ways. What is the true power and the true result of regenerative agriculture when it comes to carbon, and then what's the truth about carbon and agriculture generally relative to their claims? First one, the power of regenerative. I actually participated in an organization that was able to, have a life cycle assessment, a cradle to grave, so to speak, scientific evaluation of everything from an animal being born to any inputs that are brought into the system to the transportation of animals, every single factor that can exist that can create a carbon footprint in the life of an animal. That was conducted by Qantas Labs at a ranch in Bluffton, Georgia called White Oak Pastures. Okay, Qantas Labs is the exact same organization that performed the exact same scientific study for Impossible Foods. That's who Impossible Foods also engaged with to perform their LCA. The results of those exact two studies under that exact same science from that exact same organization, White Oak Pastures, for every pound of beef they produce, sequesters 3.5 pounds of carbon equivalents out of the atmosphere and into the soil. Okay, so it's not emitting carbon like everybody's talking about. It's pulling it out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground where it needs to be to promote healthy ecosystems, to store water, to do all the things that we've talked about in the last episode and this one. So what do the Possibles LCA say? For every pound of this hyper ultra processed food that Impossible creates, they are emitting 3.5 pounds of carbon equivalents into the atmosphere. Now that's a delta of 7 pounds difference in carbon equivalents being emitted in the atmosphere between a regenerative system per pound of product and Impossible. And yet they're patting themselves on the back for being this great solution as they're continuing to pump carbon into the atmosphere. So it's absurd that they would ever make a claim that regenerative isn't a solution, right? The other thing they do is continue to bring up antiquated data that has been admittedly challenged and reproduced. So they reference this, animal production contributes to more greenhouse gas emissions than transportation, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I think of all the planes and all the cars and all the trains and all the boats and all the things that we do for transportation. That's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. I can't believe how terrible these animals are, right? It's not the case. That study was conducted back in like 2003 or 2006 or something. And when they realized that they made an error, they corrected the study. And then the same body that did that, it was actually the Food and Agriculture of the United Nations, Food and Agriculture Organization, reissued the study in 2013. And it says that the direct impact of animal agriculture on carbon emissions is actually less than a third of what transportation is. But that doesn't stop organizations like Impossible from choosing to be intellectually dishonest and promote a talking point that has been since adjusted and corrected, which I think is just completely appalling. And then on the water issue, it's the exact same thing. So on the water issue, you got to understand that there's again, without getting too sciencey and complicated, when you look at water use in these sorts of ways, you look at green water and blue water and gray water. Gray water we won't get into because it's complicated and it's not really relevant for what I'm about to share. But green water is rain, and blue water is water, pumped from lakes or rivers or aquifers, right? And it's that blue water where you think of filling a bathtub or running an irrigation system or pulling water out of the sink that everybody is most thoughtful of. And most of the quotes that you hear on water use in animal agriculture is speaking about green water. It's 98% in a grass-finished animal of the water use of that animal is from rain. And when I say rain, I mean rain falling from the sky, infiltrating the soil, causing plants to grow, filling aquifers, filling lakes, whatever. The animal may drink, urinate, defecate back on the land. Some of that water will evaporate. It's just natural water raining from the sky in a functioning ecosystem, like we all, imagine the elk that you hunt or the deer that we hunt, or etc. Right? In the most conventional systems, 92% of the water use of beef is attributed to rain. So it's completely dishonest, right? Only something like less than 5% of water use in beef production is coming from water being pumped out of the ground and sprayed somewhere or brought somewhere, or what exactly everybody thinks when they think of, oh no, intensive water, right? They don't realize that raising cattle is less intensive or less exhaustive on water resources as, say, raising almonds in California or raising rice anywhere in the world.
I think in response to what you just laid out there, I was reading a letter from Impossible's CEO and founder, Pat Brown. I mean, he's one of the most outspoken critics of animal agriculture, and he is the voice and face of Impossible. Even though we were able to talk to Nick, I'm glad we were able to talk to Nick because he had some very interesting and I thought, reasonable at least approaches to the conversation. But something that Pat said that I think I'd be interested to hear you talk through a little bit. He wrote in a letter, in a memo, our divisive advantage over the incumbent industry is our ability to continue improving our products, processes, and supply chain in every way that matters to consumers and the environment. Week by week, year by year, far into the future. Cows aren't getting any better at making meat. We are. I thought that was, when I read that, I chuckled a bit and I thought of you. So go ahead and cows aren't getting better at making meat. We are. You've kind of touched already on the way you feel about this, but what's your reaction to that particular statement?
Yeah, man, I guess when you look at how much ground you have to cover before you get even close to the vision, to being able to realize the vision that you're casting as an opportunity, then yeah, you have a tremendous advantage because you got a long way to go. When in talking about and thinking about cows not getting more efficient at creating meat, I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that. It's just such an absurd statement. There's no.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. You're right. When I said that, I just it's dumbfounding, that one. There's a lot of this that I'm trying to be objective about, but boy, that one is just out there a bit.
So here's the deal. I mean, let's talk about how you create meat, why meat's valuable. We'll save nutrition for another conversation. I'm sure you can have some guest on that can speak to that a lot better than I can, right? But what cows do, and other ruminants in particular do, is they take, in addition to being keystone species in functioning healthy ecosystems like we've talked about, they take foodstuffs in environments, food products that humans can't eat, or plant products that humans can't eat, in environments where we cannot grow plant products that humans can eat, and they, more efficient than anything that ever has existed or will existed, convert that into human edible food in the form of meat. Right? And so when you look at the agriculture land in the world, a third of the surface of the earth is suitable for agriculture, right? 2/3 of that amount are not suitable for crops. Those are the land where we put animals. Those are the lands where there is no potential to produce human food that is plant-based. There is only a potential to produce human food and to improve ecosystems in the form of animals that we manage, right? And again, of that third of the surface that is arable or suitable for agriculture, I think it's the FAO, one of the large regulatory bodies, says that only 3% of that is considered prime, right? So there's certain, quote unquote, arable land that can only grow olives, or can only grow cassava. I mean, you're not talking about land that we could grow soybeans, let alone avocados or almonds or things like that, right? And so it's not this simple, distill everything down into a reductionist series of rudimentary equations and reinvent the wheel, right? It's extremely complex. It's much more complex than they want to cast it, than they want to present it to be. The reality is, in addition to the fact that nothing will be more efficient at producing meat than animals in areas where there's no food production alternative, nothing creates healthier food that is more nutrient dense from a caloric standpoint and offers a better amino acid profile and more minerals than animal meat. So I can't speak to that statement any more than that without blowing a gasket.
Yeah. Yeah, I told Nick, and in our conversation, I mean, I'm a potential customer of theirs. If I would much rather eat an Impossible Burger than a piece of chicken from Purdue. That's just how I feel. And so that's a big part of how I am trying to approach this. But I with Impossible specifically, run into all of these illogical barriers where, that's why I wanted to talk to Nick, and that's why I wanted to pick up the conversation with you, so I could get, really for my own edification, a little bit more of a rounded picture of what's happening here, the options, and kind of the ideology specifically of Impossible and companies like Beyond Meat and other things like that. Because as I've written for our website, these companies are being funded. They are their industry is growing at leaps and bounds. I talked to Nick. He was in Hong Kong working on their international side of their business. So this is not a shrinking enterprise, theirs or others like them. So it's something to know. And when you, I know you and I have talked about this, but when you read things like that from Pat Brown and you think about how quickly their industries are growing and the scale and impact that they're already having, I mean, to be in Burger King and Qdoba and all these other places, what do you think? I mean, just as somebody who cares about soil and healthy ecosystems and thinks about it all the time, where does that take your mind? Are you scared of the power that they're putting together here? Do you feel like eventually people will come around to other ways of thinking, or is this going to continue to grow as their funding and technology grows?
I mean, money in media goes a long way, right? I mean, as I understand it, they're valued at somewhere over $4 billion, and they've raised something like $1.5 billion. I mean, I would imagine their budget for toilet paper exceeds my entire budget for the year. I think that they're gonna, and there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, there's not a lot of money to be made in traditional agriculture. There's a hell of a lot of money to be made in technology. And so, I don't doubt that they're going to continue to do what they've done and continue to see some, progress in that vein. And again, what they've done is, employed a strategy that is listen to what I say, don't watch what I do. Right. And then going into something like a Burger King, right? I mean, it's fast food. It's ultra processed food. It's part of the problem as far as health is concerned, right? And it's rather appropriate that now the most processed food in the history of our species is joining, in that industry.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it right. When I've looked at like lab grown meats and some of the technology based industries that are popping up around the solution to this issue, that they're investing in the technology, not necessarily the nutrition of the product or what it'll do for our ecosystem. So as I told Nick, and I know you know this because you're a hunter as well. As a hunter, I am very, very interested in land use. I'm very interested in our overall ecosystem health, and that's why this matters to me. There are other reasons it matters to me. Certainly, there's a lot of cattle grazing on BLM lands that wouldn't be there if Impossible Meats gets their way in 2035. So there's just a lot of elements of it to me. But as a hunter and somebody who really cares about these landscapes, this is ultimately interesting to me for those reasons. So I really appreciate your coming on and thinking about these things with us. I know, as I've said, I know that it's not apples to apples in terms of your company and what you do and the scale and size of Impossible and what they do. But I think your perspective is valuable and juxtaposed to their perspective. And I hope you got something out of it, and I hope everybody does as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate you having me on and giving us an opportunity to, again, have a fuller, conversation. And I hope, as you noted, people are taking away from something that this isn't plant versus animals, right? This is about a system, and if what we're trying to do is predicated on change, then let's focus on the kind of change that's actually tangible, and not simply lip service. So.
Yeah, that using the word tangible is important to me because as I told you before, and I'll tell the audience, I felt that coming down to Rome Ranch, I haven't been to any production facility or manufacturing facility for Impossible, so I can't speak to that. But coming down to Rome Ranch and being with you and the team down there and seeing that, it felt like there's a real tangible thing happening here, something I can get my hands on and my head around, and I can touch and feel and see the improvements to the landscapes. And that to me means a lot. So maybe one day I'll go see how they make a plant-based burger and find maybe I'll find some real satisfaction seeing that, but I just don't know. So that's something we'll continue to talk about this in the future. I know you had a lot of good contacts for us to further these conversations with people in different ways. So we'll continue to do that here on the show, and we'll keep in touch with you, Robbie. I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ben. And for anybody that is interested in learning any more about this stuff, there's exciting new documentary coming out called Sacred Cow. I'd encourage folks to look at a book associated with that. There's a Kiss the Ground documentary. There's a Biggest Little Farm documentary. You can learn anything about Force of Nature and all of our transparency into our supply chain and what we do at forceofnaturemeats.com. Again, this isn't just about me, David and this David and Goliath conversation. There's a major global movement, and there's no food revolution without the consumer. So we need everybody to get involved and start supporting better food.
Yeah, I mean, we talk to vegans here. We talk to a lot of animal rights activists and people that think differently than we do. But what is great for me is that everybody's very conscious about what they're eating and where it's produced and where it comes from, even more so in the time of COVID. So I take that away as a positive. So thanks, Robbie. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
See ya. That's it. That's all. Another episode in the books. Thank you to Nick and Robbie for having those conversations with us. Specifically, thanks to Nick for coming to us from Hong Kong. Hopefully, you guys were able to hear both of those gentlemen answer similar questions and talk about their solutions to what they both believe is a big problem with our food systems. Again, as I said in the show already, to both of those gentlemen, I feel like it's a proximity situation. My solution for this on a personal level is to get closer to my food, shorten the supply chains, and know where it comes from. That's what I'm going to do personally. On a larger level, the point I'd like to make is our ability to feed billions of people going forward is always going to be messy. It's always going to be imperfect. It's always going to have major flaws. So any solution presented is going to have major flaws, whether it's the nutrition or the scalability, whatever it is. It's always going to have cracks, chinks in the armor. I think plant-based meat is flawed itself, but a reasonable alternative. And it kind of makes sense as a counterpoint to meat. We know meat itself isn't the problem. Killing animals for their flesh isn't necessarily the problem. Done responsibly, as Robbie points out, has a positive and long-lasting impact on how we live. So, but looking down the road, who knows? Part of this is we don't know. That's what makes it interesting. And so we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep exploring it. Got a lot of good leads from both Robbie and Nick about who to talk to next and how to continue to explore this conversation. So we're going to keep doing it here on the Hunting Collective. Phil, you have a parting shot there from today's episode. Do you think we pulled off something really was achieved here?
I mean, just introducing people to the perspectives and points of view and giving them something they haven't heard before. We're not going to find a solution right now, but it gets people thinking, and that's the most important thing, right?
You're like my inner voice. That's what my inner voice tells me.
I'm just here to prop you up, man.
Even if you're dead wrong, at least you tried. Basically, at least you're doing something. Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. So we'll revisit this conversation again. I know it's not hunting. I know it's not core. We're not telling hunting stories. We're not talking about how to kill turkeys or bears or whatever. But I think it's still very important, and so we're going to keep you covered on the show. Certainly always write into thc@themeateater.com, which I know you will do. Tell us your opinion. Tell us where we might take this conversation next. So Phil, a little bit of housekeeping. Our buddy Trey Pacou, we never did get how to pronounce his name. Trey Pacou? Pico? I did reach out to him. Trey, you're going to receive, I still haven't sent it because it's been a little busy in quarantine and COVID, but you're going to receive my old podcasting kit. Me and Phil are going to call you up and bother you about this new podcast that you're going to start around the science of hunting. So Dr. Trey, PhD, hopefully we get him on the airwaves here pretty soon. So following up on that, you might hear Trey on the show soon. Got to talk to him, see if he wants to come on. Similarly, our New Zealand hunt, our New Zealand contest giveaway with First Light, that hunt is going to be postponed until next year, obviously. We were supposed to be lifting off just about now, Phil. Supposed to be taking off in a couple of days to go to New Zealand.
Oh, man.
I know, but we're not. We're going to do it next year. So it gives me job security for a whole nother year. Can't get rid of me. I feel good. Maybe they can. Maybe they'll take this as a challenge.
Oh, yeah. They definitely can. I don't mean to kill your buzz here, but...
What about the New Zealand hunt? That's when they get rid of me, I'll say, what about the New Zealand hunt? And then maybe they'll reconsider.
You seem like you've really played this through in your head.
Yeah. Haven't you? My firing? I have no idea. Anyway, moving on. Those are just a couple of housekeeping things. The third housekeeping thing, the THC Book Club. I'm working on this baby hard. For right now, there's going to be some things by buying this book and reading it. You got to buy it yourself. I had a couple people write in and be like, do we get a coupon? Are you going to pay for the book? I'm like, no, I'm not paying for the book. You get the book. You get to keep the book. You get to read the book, sell it on eBay after you're done. Don't really care. The North American Model of Wildlife Conservation by Dr. Valerius Geist and Shane Mahoney is what we should all be reading right now. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. Phil, we got to get you a copy. Do you have one yet?
I don't know.
No coupons. You got to go buy it.
What?
Like the rest of us. You're not special.
I guess you're right.
So we all got to you all got to go out and buy that book. I know, it's tough times. I understand. I think this is an essential reading. I think everything we'll have in the book club is an essential reading. I think it's important that we all have it and read it, add it to our collections. So I understand it can be a tough ask. I do respect that. Hopefully many of you can jump in and read that book. Trust me that there will be a reward at the end for the THC Book Club. And I'm working on maybe even an email where you can subscribe and we can update you on things and we can talk through each book. So that's the THC Book Club. Many of you have asked about that. Many of you are excited about that. The thing you can do right now is go buy that book and start reading. And pretty soon we will have the next steps for you to discuss it. So that's it, Philip. 128 next week. We're going to talk tomorrow, I think, talk to Georgia Pellegrini. I've known Georgia for quite a long time. She's been around about as long as Steven Rinella, talking about wild foods, talking about how to eat better, talk about how to kill things and why you ought to. And so Georgia is a veteran of the game. She's got a television show on public TV she's trying to crowdfund. So I wanted to let her come on, speak her piece. hopefully you guys can hear. If you got a little extra dollar to throw her away so she can produce her television show, her funding got pulled because of the pandemic. So want to talk to her anyway. This is another reason to have her on. Let her speak her mind and say what she wants to say, and hopefully convince everyone that her TV show is worthy of being put on the air. So we will see you next time, episode 128. Say bye, Phil.
Goodbye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.